Okay, now let me officially welcome everybody to Is There Justice in Our Juvenile Justice System? Today's webinar. It is provided by the PA Care Partnership in association with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services grant. At any time during the presentation, please type your questions into the Q&A feature, which you will find by running your mouse along the bottom of the Zoom screen. Today's moderators are Jamal Ford. Hi, Jamal. And Nancy Massey. That's me from the PA Care Partnership. Jamal.
Hello, everyone. I will be introducing our speaker for today. Often youth are seen as troublemakers instead of kids in need of support and help. Antoine will talk to us about how kids find themselves in the juvenile justice system who need direction and the best ways to better, and why releasing youth from juvenile justice facilities back into the communities that put them there in the first place is not working. Thank you for joining us today. Our speaker is Antoine Howlett. Antoine is an inspirational speaker for youth, a first-generation entrepreneur, and an author whose mission is to show others how to turn life's obstacles into opportunities. His journey connects with at-risk youth on a deep level. As a boy raised in Queens, New York, by a single hardworking mother, at a young age, he looked towards the streets of the city for guidance into what he thought was becoming a man. Unfortunately, that environment, including a lack of direction and resources, led him to follow the wrong peers and ultimately lose his sense of self-worth. Antoine was left behind in the third grade, selling drugs at 12, and charged with a felony at the age of 25. But even with all the odds against him, his life completely changed after he decided to find positive mentors who helped him shape a new reality in his life. As always, if you all could please add your questions into the Q&A. As Nancy mentioned, and with that, I will turn it over to our speaker, Antoine Howlett.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's an honor to speak with you all, and it's a blessing to have your presence here. So we'll start this up. All right. All right, so great question I always get asked all around. Who are you? My name is Antoine Howlett. I'm a first-generation motivational speaker, entrepreneur, second in my generation to graduate college, and an author. I speak all over the country to at-risk youth and educators on developing a sense of resiliency and how I was able to turn many of my childhood obstacles into opportunities in growing up. So I'd like to also give you a gist of my vision. So my vision is to see at-risk youth transform into resilient leaders, embracing their unique talents, contribute to society, and inspire future generations. So one thing that I've realized in growing up in an at-risk community, I always wanted to impact others. And when I speak to different students, different individuals, I just let them know, we got to create something that can outlive us. And I believe treating others well, being that mentor, being that sense of guide is important for our youth to understand. My mission is to ignite a spark of hope within these individuals. Many at-risk youth have lost hope at a young age. They are at the point where they're breaking at a young age and they're giving up on everything. And my mission is to show them like, hey, you can come from this community and still thrive. You can come from this background and still thrive. You can come from this lifestyle and still become something different if you decide to make something called a choice. And that choice is very valuable. The choices that you make today will be tomorrow's outcomes and tomorrow's destiny. That's one word it's one sentence that I always say to the youth that I interact with across the world. So when it comes to me, that's me right there. Yes, young Antoine Howlett. I'll give you guys a bit of my story. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York City. I dealt with a lot of trauma from the age of 1 to 7. My father was abusive and alcoholic, and I knew what alcohol tasted like by the age of 4 due to his neglect, due to his unparenting skills. And from that childhood, I just dealt with a lot of lost hope. My mom made the best decision ever. At the age of 7, she was like, this abusive relationship is not doing anything for my 2 boys. They need some type of change, and I'm willing to leave this relationship in hopes that their lives can change into a better form. Now, as she decided to leave that relationship, which I always speak and I always tell others, this was the best decision she ever made. What happened to me at the age of 7 is I was deciding to look for a father figure. It wasn't one of those relationships where she completely took my father out of my life, but she gave him the option. She said, hey, you want to show up for Antoine and Todd? It's up to you. But my father was a different type of dad. He would be the father to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to come over to the house and pick you guys up. I'll be there in 5 minutes. And I remember waiting at the window. That 5 minutes turned to 10. That 10 turned to 15. The 15 turned to 30 minutes. Then after 30 minutes, there was no one who showed up. So I dealt with that at a young age for continuous days, every day, just sitting at that window, waiting for this person to show up. And I was just fed lies. At some point, I decided that, hey, my hope that I had in this figure, I cannot have it anymore. So I lost hope at a young age. And a lot of our at-risk youth have dealt with the same things that I'm talking to you about. Now, at that time frame, I had a older brother, 4 years older than me. I had what they call the younger brother mindset, where it was like, I don't want to do what you're doing. I'm going to do something different. Me personally, looking for a father figure, I decided to look in towards the streets for that. My mother was a hard worker. She worked double shifts just to keep the roof over our head. And I decided at some point, you know what? I'm going to look for people who are just like me, kids who are just like me, who go through the same issues as me, and use them as guidance. And that led me into drug abuse by the age of 9. That led me into joining gangs. That led me into being around violent criminals at a very young age without my mom even knowing, because she was spending most of her time working and providing for us. So over time, as in becoming in elementary school, I ended up getting left behind. 3rd grade, it was very hard for me, mainly I think because suffering with the displacements of my father not showing up. I lashed out in class. I lashed out around social workers. I lashed out around my peers. And it was because I was suffering from that loss of hope, that lack of hope in me. Now, my mother, at some point, she's like, Antoine, you got to get your stuff together. You're going down the wrong route. I know you were left behind, but don't let that get to you. And I had an educator by the name of Miss Kamler. I remember in the 3rd grade, she told me, she said, you can be a superstar if you choose. And I was just like, I don't want to do anything. She'd always ask me, what do I want to do with my life? And I tell her, I want to help others, but I just don't know how to. Now, she knew that the environment that I was in was surrounded by gang leaders, surrounded by drugs, just surrounded by a lot of negative things. So over time, I had that memory of her saying, you can be something great if you make the choice. Now, for me, I already made the choice to hang around negative individuals. I made the choice to hang around drug dealers, like I said. And my mom, at some point, she said, listen, all I need you to do is get out of elementary school, hopefully graduate junior high, and hopefully graduate high school. Now, I felt like at some point I was just pushed through elementary. The educators there were just like, hey, you're a hard kid to deal with. You're going to junior high school, but we hope that things can get better for you. And during that time frame, I still did the same things. I knew what a nightclub life was like by the 7th grade. No kid should have to deal with that. But I always instill and tell people that it was my choice. It was my choice because I wanted to be around people that I thought suffered from the same pain as me. Now, junior high school for me, the last year was a little bit different. I ended up hanging around with more negative friends, doing marijuana, doing drinking, all different types of things, just to harbor that pain that I was going through, harbor that absence that I was going through in my childhood. And I remember it like yesterday, a dean came up to me. He said, Antoine, we're going to need you to fill out this list to jump into the next high school. And New York, they had something where we'll do like a list of high schools that we want to attend for the next year, the graduating year. Me, that day came, I remember hanging out with friends, cutting school. And it was the worst decision ever, because that later that week that came in, they said, hey, okay, we have the list of high schools that everyone's attending. So many of my friends was going to good high school. One of my friends was going to an elite high school. And me, I was subject to go to the default school. Now, the default high school for me was considered as Springfield Gardens High School. The dean was so mad. He said, Antoine, I told you to fill out these applications if it's going to give you an opportunity. And I realized today that I didn't react to the resources that were around me, which a lot of our at-risk youth are suffering from. They just don't know how to react to these resources when their environment is giving them different type of issues. Now, this default high school was completely different than any type of high school I could imagine. As I walked into the high school, there was a level 3 security. So we would have to put our bags in an x-ray machine, walk through a scanner, get x-rayed down as we walked into school every day. There was 32 officers, police officers on staff every single day at this high school. So at some point, to me, it felt like I was walking through an airport every single day. So growing up in the streets, I had some fears, but it was like the same fears were in that school. So I didn't know, was there a different school? Was there a different type of education for me? Because it seemed pretty crazy in that school at certain times. Now, during this trip in high school that I had, the ninth grade year was a bit different for me. I made a choice and I said, I want to try to escape out of this environment and do something different. I ended up joining the football team. A teacher by the name of Mrs. Smith came up to me and said, hey, Antoine, I think you would be great on the football team if you decide to use football as an escape. I've seen you in the neighborhood and you're doing too many different things. I'm seeing you're hanging on the corner with these grown men. And I know that's not you, but I think you should try a sport to escape some of the realities that you're going through. It may give you a good opportunity to change in life. For me, I decided to take it. I said, you know what? I'm going to try out for the football team and hopefully get into a different perspective. Now, joining the football team, I remember the first game ever. That changed my perspective because as I'm in the locker room, the coach pulls me to the side. He says, Howlett, don't go to the game today. I need to talk to you. You can attend, but you won't be able to play. And I'm like, wait, I just invited my mom here, my family here, and I'm not able to play. What does he mean? He said, the doctor said that you may have a heart murmur. So you won't be able to play until you get blood work done. Now that crushed me. I wanted football as a source of exit, like I was telling everybody. And to hear that I didn't have the opportunity, it was like, wow, I really want to do this, but I can't even use it as a resource because I may have a heart murmur. So I ended up telling my mother that day, and she was just at an awe. And the coach said, hey, you'll get some blood work done. It may take you a couple of months to get the work back in the x-rays, but we'll still have a spot on you for the team if it's open. Now, in the chat, I'd like to ask a question. How many of you believe that I decided to wait for the opportunity to get the blood work, or I decided to go back to the streets? So for those who may have said that I decided to wait, I'll be honest, I did not decide to wait. I decided, hey, I'm not going to wait this 6 months. I'm going to go back to the environment that I know. I'm going to go back to hanging with the gang members, hanging with the youth that are separated from their parents, just like me. And that was the worst thing I've ever did. Now, I got the results back from the coach, and 3 months later, he said, yeah, you don't have that heart murmur. But I was too far down the pipeline where I was choosing to hang with that group every single day, choosing to hang with the negative crowd every single day, choosing to smoke weed with friends who thought it was a sense of entertainment every single day. Now, as high school started going on, I was considered in the 11th grade, but with ninth grade credits. So left back once again. And I remember a day that changed every day. My mom decided, she said, you know what? I don't think you're going down the right route. I want to go to this thing called the Parents and Teachers Conference. That Parents and Teachers Conference, out of the 3 years, was the first time she ever decided to show up. I tried every little thing not to let her show up. I was the one kid that's like, yeah, the school's shutting down for the day. Everything that I could to not have her show up, I tried. But she ended up coming to that school. And as we entered the high school, Miss Smith was right there, waving her hands, saying, Miss Howell, I'd like to speak to you first. Now, there was a whole line of parents before us, but she actually told those parents, I want to go to Antoine Howlett first. Now, as my mom walked into her classroom, Miss Smith just completely broke down and started crying. And I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, wow, this educator's just crying right in front of my mom. I don't know what she's crying for. And my mom is very heartwarming. And she decided to hug her and say, hey, what's going on? And as she started crying, she said, I don't want Antoine to become like my son. He died at the age of 16 due to street violence, and I don't want him in the same direction. And I can see that he's heading in that direction. Now, for me, that was a bit of a deal breaker because I didn't have a connection with an educator like that. I never knew anything about her son. I didn't know she was going through these pains, but she saw something in me that was different. And most students, most at-risk youth, they just need that connection with someone to speak up and say, you know what, I know what direction you're going in, and I don't want you to be in that. For my mom and me to hear her and see her crying, it broke me. My mom then made the decision that day. She said, we're getting you out of this school and we're going to move to a different state. So as I packed up that U-Haul about a week later, and my mom said, hey, you know, you're going to come to a town called Whitehall, Pennsylvania. And in that U-Haul, some of the same habits came with me, I'll be honest. It was the anxiety, the depression, the stress, all the things that I traveled with since a young age came with me in that U-Haul as she wanted to shift my environment for me. Now, jumping into Whitehall district, it was a complete culture shift for me. I went from a high school where there was 32 plus officers on the ground every single day to one officer in the school. And for me, it was like, whoa, there's no cops here. Like, I thought cops were in every school. And as I decided to shift into that school, I gave my mom a promise. I said, you know what? I'm going to try to get my stuff together and graduate school. But I did have one foot in the streets and one foot in education because my habits, my track record, those things that I were attached to were stuck with me. I didn't make the choice to let them go. At this time frame, my mom said, you know what? Going to this school is a good opportunity for you. You'll be able to graduate if you decide to do the right things. I pushed through to this school like nothing, but at the same time, foot still in the streets. I ended up graduating high school. It was actually a blessing because at some point, I remember my mom literally calling the high school up and saying, yeah, my son brought me this diploma, but I need to know that it's real. I need an authenticated one. And they're like, Miss Howell, this is the real diploma. So she dealt with so much trauma with me being a kid who just really didn't care about school. At some point also in New York City, I was one of the students who within a 120-day time frame, I missed 90 days of school. So that's a bit of my record in cutting school. Like it was really bad to a point. And after graduating, my mom gave me a choice. She said, you know what? I'd like you to work in the workforce, stay out the streets, and you graduated. It's a blessing in our family, but you have to become a man and make some right decisions. As a youth, you made some wrong decisions for a long time, and I'm really wanting you to grow up. So I decided at some point, I said, you know what? I'm gonna still do what I do and make some money on the side. I didn't really care for work. And it was mainly because those who I hung around, even in this new environment, were the same, just like me. They didn't have direction. They didn't want to make better choices. And during this time frame, I remember like yesterday, one event happened where I ended up getting incarcerated for marijuana. Now, ended up getting incarcerated by the same officer who was in my high school. And he told me, he said, Antoine, you're smoking the devil's cabbage, and I have to take you in for this. And for me, I was like, man, I'm just trying every little thing to do a little bit of right, but clearly this is putting me back into the system. Now, one thing that happened, my mom found out again. She flipped. She was so angry. She was to the point where she was just like, listen, you're either going to grow up or you're going to get kicked out. And I decided, I said, you know what? I'm getting older. I want to see what the workforce is like. Let me stop hanging around these individuals. Let me decide to make better choices. So that was the first time I ever decided, you know what, let me cut everything off and see what life has for me. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to apply to some jobs. I ended up going to a grocery store called Redner's, filled out an application, and they called me within 2 days. They say, hey, Mr. Howlett, we read your application. We like what you've graduated from a local high school. We want to take you in as a stocker. So my first day into that job was a very different experience for me. So as I walked into that job for orientation and part of my interview, they told me, hey, you're good to go. We actually want to train you today. So within the first hour, as I'm training at the register, I noticed officer walks in, and this officer looks familiar. He ended up being the officer that locked me up about a year ago for the marijuana. And I saw him, the person who's training me says, oh yeah, they usually come in for shoplifters, and that's what he has. So let me go back to the director and have him train you the rest of the day. So as the director comes up to me, managers walking with the officer to the back, we're spending about a good 30 minutes on this register. I'm learning every single thing. I'm actually full of hope because I'm like, listen, my mom's seeing that I'm out of this situation and I'm trying to do better. Now, as the officer walks out with the shoplifter, the manager comes back to me. He says, hey, Mr. Howlett, I need to talk to you real quick. And I said, okay. He said, I don't know if this person has anything against you, but he told me to look further into your background, and we did, and we're not going to be able to have you here. So within an hour, the source that I used for hope was taken away, and I was hurt. I was crushed. In my mind, I'm like, wow, I'm trying every single thing to escape this reality, but life doesn't want to give me anything back. Everything to escape this reality, but the world seems against me. Now, I had a choice. I had a choice to be resilient and push through, apply to more jobs, or a choice to go back into the street mentality, go back into my comfort zone. You see, working was uncomfortable for me and the streets was comfortable for me. And I made the choice that day to go back into the streets full throttle. I said, you know what? There's no position for me in work. Clearly, I can't do anything with this. I'm going to go back to what I know. So from the age of 20 to 25, I really just deep dived into drug dealing, all types of drugs, just to escape and receive money, what I thought was being productive. Now, around the age of 25, on my mother's birthday, everything changed for me as I was hanging around two individuals which were friends, and one thing led to another. And as they're arguing about money, one friend ends up stabbing the other while I'm there. And I remember it like yesterday. I kept saying to myself, why do you make these choices? Why do you keep making these choices? And as the officer got there, he said, well, Mr. Howlett, you're coming as well because you were involved. You didn't stop this thing from happening. And as I sat in the jail and they took me, I started to learn what conspiracy was. So, life-changing event on my mother's birthday, I had to call her and say, hey, I'm sitting in the county jail because of an incident that I had nothing to do with, an incident that I could have stopped, but I chose not to stop. And it was heartbreaking for her to pick up that phone and say, you know what, I don't know what to do with you, but maybe God will. And at that point, I realized, you know what, sometimes the choices that you make at a young age, they will always come back to you. And it's not always sometimes, it's actually all the time. And when I decided, therefore, to really, really say, you know what, I'm done with this, I sat in a county jail and I started reading a lot of books, a lot of books on my mind, a lot of books on my emotions, a lot of books on different realities. And I understood that, it was a choice that I made that will live with me for the rest of my life. And I sat 9 months before I actually met the judge. And this judge was very different. She said, Mr. Howlett, you know, in the 13 years that I've been here, it's very, very seldom that I see a parent in court with their kid. And that's you. And I'm going to give you 9 months time serve, but you're going to take a deal for conspiracy to assault. And I took that deal. I did not want to be in the system. I understood that I did have some impact in being around that crime, not stopping and being engaged with them. And as I exited that prison, I decided to make a choice. I said, you know, one thing you can do is go back or go forward. And I calculated my actions. I realized that, hey, years ago, when I gave up in that grocery store because the officer pointed me out, what did it lead into? It led into this lifestyle. I started calculating every single decision. And as I speak to youth all over the country, I tell them, calculate the decisions that you've made in the past, because they're going to help you calculate decisions that you make in the future. And as I calculated that decision, I said, whoa, the streets seem easy for me to go back after prison. That's what they say statistics will have for you. But I made the choice. I said, you know what? I'm going to do something different. I'm going to find a mentor. Like I told you, I read a lot of books, and all the books were saying, my mentor did this, my mentee. And I'm like, what is this thing called a mentor? And I decided to find a mentor in business. And he told me, Antoine, you know, you need to shift your mind, but you also need to shift your environment, because every single environment has a requirement. And your environment that you're in requires you to be this type of person. And you're not that type of person. So I need you to make the change. I need you to make the choice. I made that choice exiting prison. I decided, you know what? I'm going to find a 9 to 5, regardless of having this felony in my background. I'm just going to work hard. I'm really going to work hard and change my life and try to go into a better direction. So I decided, you know what? We're going to fill out some job applications. Came home in my mother's house, 110 applications in. I did not give up. I always remembered that educator telling me, hey, you were just like my son. I always remember the conversation that I had with a correctional officer saying, Howlett, you can be different if you see different. And I decided, you know, let me continuously fill out these applications, 110, 111. And I got a call from one job in a warehouse. And they said, hey, you know, we see that you got a background, but we're willing to work with you. We worked with felons in the past, and we're going to give you an opportunity. I took that opportunity, and it changed everything. I decided, you know what, I'm going to continuously work at this job. I'm going to stay out of the streets. I made a different choice. And during that time in that job frame, they actually said, hey, Mr. Howlett, you've been working for us for about 3 months. We like your communication skills. We want you to become a union representative and negotiate some contracts with us. Now, this is coming from the kid from New York City who really had lost hope in all things. And to have this opportunity, it was like, wow, I get to represent people and learn different things about negotiating contracts. I'm all for it. Like, it was to the point when they told me, hey, we're going to give you this opportunity. I was like, well, did you look into my background? And it was like, Antoine, we hired you already. We already know. And it was just so unbelievable for me. Now, deciding to take this position opened so many opportunities for me, because when working with this union and having resiliency and working in general, they say, hey, Mr. Howlett, we're willing to give you a 2-year degree if you want to go to school completely free on us. And I took it. I said, you know what, coming from this background, if I do this, this may open a different light for me. So I decided to go into school full time while working full time. And I ended up having a son on the way during this event. Now, my son was the motivational why for me, because I said, you know what, I want to give him every single opportunity that I didn't have. I want to use this as a strong push to get through anything in life. And as I decided to do that, I remember it like yesterday, my wife came up to me and she said, you know what, I want to move out of this town, but it's going to be really hard for us. And I'd like for us to get a new home or something different just to shift our environment. And I knew for me coming up in a different environment, what it could do for a child's mind. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to work hard and we're going to be able to get this home. I worked 90 days straight, 12-hour days, child on the way, and I ended up getting this home. I ended up getting a closing costs because I built resiliency, because I had something in my mind to say, hey, you know what? You're going to be the second year generation to graduate college. You're going to be one of the third individuals in your generation that actually own a home. This is how you set the standard for the next generation. Now, in setting this standard, I actually ran into another mentor who said, hey, Antoine, your story, your past, man, you can use that as an advantage to plant seeds into others' minds, to plant seeds into kids from the same neighborhood, to plant seeds to kids who are in the juvenile system, even for adults. You can plant positive seeds because you decided to make that choice and be resilient. You decided to make the choice and say, hey, I'm not going to fall victim to statistics. I'm going to use the resources around me, the people who've empowered me, and I'm going to use that to break through and change my generation. Now, that is exactly what I did, and I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for educators, if it wasn't for positive social workers, if it wasn't for that correctional officer telling me, hey, if you see different, you can be different. You know, I decided to use those seed planters, as I call them, as a better tool in life. You know, we all go through ups and downs, but one thing that I've learned, every Wednesday I write my wins. I call it Win Wednesdays. And I write the wins that I've had, because every single week you're going to go through something different, but I use the resources that I've had in the past, the words that they've shared with me. I use that as something like an umbrella in a storm. You know, life will offer you different obstacles, but what are the opportunities that you're taking from them? I use feedback as an opportunity, and it's truly been a blessing to help me change my life. So that's a bit of my story. And I'd like to let you know my reality as an at-risk youth. So as I was saying, you know, I dealt with a lot of substance abuse and mental health issues at a young age. And I like to kind of give you a bit of brief information on that, because at-risk youth often struggle with substance abuse and mental health issues, including highways of substance dependency, undiagnosed and untreated mental health conditions, and limited access to appropriate interventions and support. So for me, I had no idea of what type of support to look for as a young individual using drugs. And most of the kids in my neighborhood, they were going through the same thing. They didn't have those avenues of help, or you can go this route. And usually it's because we, at that time frame, resources were different. You get students and kids that are afraid to ask for help. I was one of those people, one of those individuals that was like, you know what, I'm not going to look for help because I don't know the impact of this drug on my mind. When I speak to at-risk youth now, I also tell them, like, listen, you know, at a young age, I decided to use this drug, but what if I was told about the effects on my mindset later in life? They're not told the effects of smoking marijuana at a young age to the dependency that they'll have on it later in life. For me as well, I dealt with trauma as childhood experiences as well. So many at-risk youth have experienced various forms of trauma, including physical and sexual abuse and neglect. Witnessing violence at home and public, this kind of exposure can have lasting impacts on their overall well-being and behavior. Like I said, I grew up in a household that was very abusive, and that trauma stuck with me. Seeing my mom be abused by my father, seeing my father continuously drink, remembering him giving me a bottle of beer at the age of 4 years old, those things stuck on me and had me use those drugs as kind of like a antidepressant at a young age. I remember being a kid in a class that smelled like weed, and teachers are like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you doing this? And I looked at it as a source of, this is how we handle our pain. And I remember always having a flashback of my father saying that, hey, this is how you handle pain. This is what big men do. And that impact can affect children so much. But one thing as well, I always say my reality as an at-risk youth was the limited support system. At-risk youth tend to like supportive relationships and positive role models in their lives, but due to the limited access to mentors, community support networks, and other constructive after-school programs, their vulnerability and involvement in delinquent behavior increases. You know, when one thing that I've always heard is there's nothing to do. I get that from all the kids that I speak to, but there's nothing to do, Antoine. And I tell them, find something better to do. I'm not telling you to find anything to do, find something better to do. I remember growing up having no type of community support. There was little to no after school programs. And for me, I believe with at-risk youth, there has to be some type of program that can actually help instill a better mindset. Now I'm working with some peers who are actually having an after school program built on emotional intelligence. And this provides value to the kids' mindsets. So how do kids find themselves in the juvenile justice system? I believe delinquent behavior is the number one. You know, engaging in delinquent behavior or criminal behavior such as theft, drug abuse, assault, vandalism can lead children into the juvenile justice system. Most of these children that are choosing this route is because that's what they're considered as only knowing. And that's what the environment is doing. That's what peer pressure is leading them to. They don't have the positive role models. They don't have a person coming from the same background saying, hey, you know, I've dealt with this, but choose this route. I recently had a talk with what I call him as a scholar. He was in the juvenile justice system. I worked with him in a warehouse, and now he's into entrepreneurship. And I asked him, I said, you know, what was the issue for you? And he said, you know, Antoine, it wasn't that I was in the system. And he said, while I was in the system, I didn't have any tools of coming home. He said, I was sent home, but I didn't have any resources around me. And I didn't know how to react to those resources. I had people telling me to go get a job, but I didn't have people telling me what type of trades would work with a person who has this type of background. So when they go back into those environments, this is what they're dealing with. And at a young age, it leads into delinquent behavior. Poverty and the lack of resources. Children growing up in poverty face various challenges, including limited access to education, healthcare, extracurricular activities. The lack of positive opportunities and support networks can push them towards risky behavior and increase their likelihood of coming into contact with the juvenile justice system. Now, I always tell people every environment has a requirement. And these challenges, these environments, these, how can I say it? These communities that are neglected at times, actually, when a child goes back into that, or when a child is developed and that grows up in that, we have to understand that this is all they know. If you're around a book every single day and you see that book every single day, you begin to know the front end, the back end, the pages of it. Some of these kids, a great amount, are around negativity every day. And when you're around that in your mind, it's continuously what you're thinking about. Now, compare that to the kid that's around positivity every single day. What are they around every single moment? The resources are different. And these students, these at-risk youth, it comes down to the lack of resources. I know there's a lot of funding issues as well, but it really comes down to a point where these students, these kids don't have that reach. They don't even know what to reach for. Family circumstances, number 3. Unstable and dysfunctional family situations, including neglect, abuse, substance abuse, and domestic violence, can place children at a higher risk of becoming involved in the juvenile justice system. The lack of supportive and nurturing environment can lead them into to seek validation or escaping through delinquent behaviors. I always understood at a young age that I wanted to be affirmed, and we all have that sense in us that seeks affirmation through others. But when that other is a person who could care less about your future, it happens that these kids go down the wrong path. I noticed growing up man, this person that I hung with at a young age that was telling me, hey, you can smoke this, we could go party, we can do this. They could care less about my situation. They didn't validate any type of positivity that I was doing. They only validated the wrong that I was doing in life. So I like to say the power of environment is so important. One quote that I always say is every environment has a requirement. Releasing youth from juvenile justice facilities back into communities that initially placed them is not working due to the lack of support and the persistent challenges faced by these young individuals, including limited access to education, employment opportunities, and stable housing, which often leads to a higher likelihood of re-entry. So for me, I understood very well that community is important. We all want to be a part of community, but some of these kids are going into the same communities that told them, hey, you can do this at a young age. Hey, go rob this person. Hey, don't think about your mind. Hey, just do this today. Worry about today. And I believe when we put these kids back into these communities, they've had some type of shift in the juvenile justice system, but every single day they're waking up in these neighborhoods. Every single day they're around these individuals. Every single day there's a higher chance of them going back because they don't learn how to react to resources. I truly believe in talking with so many at-risk youth myself that a point of reference is inside that system, inside that county, inside that social worker's office, where they can be told, hey, you know what? I know you're going back into this community, but I want you to shift. I want you to change. This is how you change. These are tools that you can use. These are places that you go. This is a trade that you can use. So I believe as they go back into those environments, what tools are they going back with? Is it just a person saying, don't do this? Or is it a person saying, here, this is why you're doing this. This is why you shouldn't do this. And this is a resource you can use to keep from doing this. Oh, sorry. So being the face of choice, that's what I call it. I never say that I am the face of change. I am the face of choice. I decided to make better choices in my life. I decided to understand and visualize and listen to those workers, those employees, those mentors, those people around me saying, hey, Antoine, you know what? Choose this route, and this will be the result of this route. I am a person who advocates for at-risk youth to change their lives, to literally just shift their realities and be the first in their generations to set the standard. And it's truly an honor to be the face of choice. I like to also play a video for you that I geared towards our attendees. And it's always a blessing to speak to you individuals. And
you see, I was born in New York City. I grew up in an environment where statistics and society told me that I could be nothing. I believed it at one point. I chose to go in that direction, but what I understood growing up was that direction was infected by those who had a negative mindset. You see, I grew up in a household where it was a single mother, and we lived in a basement where liquid was falling from the ceiling onto our clothes, and we had to go to school the next day. Filled with shame. You see, I was considered as an at-risk youth, but where I'm at today, a lot of people ask me, how did I get here? And there's two resources that I understood to learn better in my life. And the first was my mind. I understood that at a young age, I suffered from a victim mentality. I suffered from a negative mindset. And that mindset itself had me do wrong things. That mindset itself had me not believe in those who believed in me. And the other thing that I used to help me grow is the resources around me. And I call those resources seed planters, right? These seed planters are individuals. They may look like correctional officers. They may look like social workers. They may look like their principal. They may look like your teacher. They may look like your mom. They may look like your younger brother, your older brother, your dad. They may look like anyone. They may be a boy. It may be a girl. It doesn't matter the age. But these seed planters are capable of putting positive seeds into a negative mind, and we cannot forget these individuals. You see, these individuals are gifted from the get. They've been able to understand problems themselves that they had at a young age and give solutions to those at a young age as they are older. You see, these seed planters understand the power of the mindset. They understand the power of environment and requirements. They understand the power of being there. And this is what I want those seed planters to understand. Do not give up. Do not give up. You see, your capabilities is a gift. Your choice of being the one who's putting positivity into these negative minds is a true blessing that is needed more than ever in this world. Do not give up. You see, I'm the product of a teacher who never gave up. I'm the product of a mother who never gave up. I'm the product of a friend who never gave up. I'm the product of a mentor who never gave up. And now you can see that my life that I live is chosen by them. I made the choice to follow the right direction, but I want those seed planters to understand this. If there's one thing I need you to understand, is that your gift is being used by a person just like we have, a person from a negative community, a person whose environment said so much things about them, a person who was left back in the third grade when statistics said I would be in prison. Yes, I dealt with that, but look where I'm at today because of a positive seed plant, a person who put positivity into my mind. And this video is for them. This audio is for them. This lifestyle that I live is for them, to show that mentor that I was able, that I decided to take those calculated steps and make the right decision. So remember those two choices, the mind and the resources. You see, my mind was negative at a young age. But as I got older, I understood the power of the thought. You see, the resources that I had at a young age was drug dealers, but then I understood they had no direction for me in life. And the resources that I use now are the positive people around me, and that's you. That's you. We are blessed to have you in the world. We are blessed to use the direction that you paid for us. And we are listening. And you have to remember one thing. True leaders are capable of planting trees that they will never be able to sit on. I'm going to say this again. True leaders are capable of planting trees that they will never be able to sit on. And I am the product of them. Regardless if my seed planters will ever see the tree that I'm developing, today is the day to understand those trees, those leaves are developing. Don't give up on that kid. Don't give up on that kid from that block. Don't give up on that girl from that neighborhood. Don't give up from that kid in the juvenile system. They have that thing in them called hope. And that's all they need. That's all they need is that little bit of faith. A little bit of faith in them can go a long way. And it's truly a blessing to have a world full of positive seed planters. My name is Antoine Howlett, and this is as real as it gets.
Thank you very much for your time and patience. And it's always an honor to speak and be around and give you my time. I see we have a couple questions in the Q&A as well.
Yes, we do. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A. Thank you, Antoine, for presentation.
It's an honor.
Really appreciate it. And we are going to, Nancy, are you good? Did you want to say anything?
Thank you, Jamal. I would. I've been wanting to discuss the subject of juvenile justice for a while. And so I know this is personal. And when Jamal came to me and he says, there's this guy, and I said, let's do it, and I'm feeling overwhelmed that Antoine gave us not only his story, which is such a gift for anyone to share, but that he pointed a lot of us, and I can see by comments in the chat, towards the areas where we need to do better in our juvenile justice system. And I thank you very much for that, Antoine. And I'm going to step back and Jamal, let you go ahead and do the Q&A. Thank you.
You may appreciate that. All right, Antoine, we got some questions here in the Q&A, and I'm going to probably pepper in some of my questions for you.
Absolutely.
Also, so we can have a little bit of a conversation about juveniles justice system. I saw somebody had put in the chat that they consider it the juvenile legal system. So just from your point of view and what you've experienced working with the youth and young adults that you've worked with through your time. So the first question is from an anonymous attendee. It says that you mentioned that when you were a youth, you didn't understand how to access or utilize resources around you. What would you recommend to service providers as well as youth themselves in order for resources and services to be utilized or accessed?
So one thing that I've realized, and there's a system that I always call the reverse engineering system for success, right? And for me, at a young age, I was told about resources, but I didn't know the benefits of them. I didn't know, hey, sticking with this mentor, he would be able to have you get out of this reality. So I was never showed that, hey, this is what productivity looks like. This is what growth looks like if you do these following steps. So I believe for those workers, if you're able to communicate to them the end point, right? The new beginning, as we can say, and then go backwards and say, hey, this is what it looks like. It looks like you reading this book every single day. It looks like you showing up to this meeting every single day. It looks like you learning this habit, this mental health idea, this concept every single day. It looks like you doing this, and then you will read this results. You actually have to kind of reverse engineer failure and reverse engineer success.
I think you make a really good point there. I think that's looking at your past choices and then redefining those things. I think that's an awesome point. Thank you. So our next question is, what do you say to youth that are offered help and are continuing to deny that they need any of the resources offered? Because I think a lot of us who have worked in juvenile justice and work with youth, we get a lot of fight. You know, youth don't want these things. They don't realize these are some of the things that could help them. They don't look as people who are trying to help them as helpers. So how do you feel about that?
So one thing that helps me be relatable is actually letting these individuals know, hey, without my help, where is it getting you? And you have to have that conversation of the choice of not receiving this help. Where is it going to get you next week? Okay, about next week, I always use the 5-5-5 that I tell people: 5 minutes, 5 months, and 5 years. And I say, okay, the choice of not using this help, where's it going to get you in 5 minutes? You may feel, well, okay, I'm done with this. But in 5 months, what are the results of your life? Where is it gonna end up? And then in 5 years, what will happen? Will you need it again, or will you seek it? So the action of taking that step and saying, hey, you know what, I need the help. I like to break it down in a form where you're not wanting the help from me. Who are you going to get this help from? And where's that help going to get you? What do you see as growth? What do you see as quote unquote success? And for most of them, just talking with a lot of at-risk youth, success is just shifting an environment, a different place. Well, I tell them a different place requires a different mindset and different habits, different actions, which will lead to different results.
I think that's an awesome tool that you just gave us to help us define what our choices are in the moment and in the future. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Lisa asked, during these times, was your mom trying to help, but was also at a loss for resources and where to go as well?
My mom, she was really trying to verbally help, but at some time she didn't know how far I was in. Like I said, she was a hard worker. Her goal was just to keep that roof over her head. And she always had this saying that, hey, I can't be your father, but you don't have to look for fathers in the streets. So it was really hard for her to adapt into a style of parenting where I didn't listen. And like I said, she's working double shifts. At times I leave the house and come back by the time she comes back from work. So she didn't have that room to put her foot in because there was a lot that she didn't know what was going on. But it also showed in the results I received in life where she's like, wait, I I didn't know this was happening because I was so focused on just work that I didn't pay attention to your emotions, your mindset after we split, your life after your dad left.
Thank you for that answer. That was awesome. So Patrick asks, this is how we handle our pain. Is this not the toxic rationalization of legalizing marijuana and creating a falsehood that medical marijuana is also a so-called treatment option? And I find this question interesting on a lot of layers, but I'll defer to you and let you tell us what you think.
I believe he is absolutely correct. Like I said, I experienced marijuana myself from the age of 8 to about 26, 25. And what I experienced it as was an escape, right? It held the pain every single day. All right, your mom's screaming at you for not being here. Well, you go hang with the friends who's doing this. And it was used as a tool of escape. And I believe with legalizing it, more kids are seeking it as a tool of escape. And now it's okay for them. Now they feel like, hey, everybody's able to do this. But one thing, I have a student that I'm working with now, and not a student, an adult, and he's around 23 years old, heavily into the marijuana, the medicinal use of it. And I tell him, I say, hey, okay, if you're using this to help your mind, why do you need it so much during your day? If you're not able to operate and be around your kid, maybe you need to seek other avenues of understanding your mind rather than using this drug. And I feel personally that it's not helping society. There is some individuals who may need it due to physical needs, and I fully understand that. But when you have a point of access that lets anyone in, just by saying they suffer from this, little do you know this person is not suffering from this and they're using this as a tool to have fun. It leads into something later in life where they're going to be dependent on this, where they won't even be able to work a job because they're sedated.
Thank you for that answer. Like I said, I think that's a multi-layered topic, and it's a very interesting one. And I think it gives us some room to sort of talk about it. And we next year when we're planning our webinar. So thank you for your thoughts on that. What would you say to a parent who tells the county or system that the juvenile is the problem and not the parent, so there is no reason why the parent should have to change their behavior, etc.? If the environment is the literal problem, then how do you help the situation when the parent will not empower any change for the young person?
One that topic sits so well with me. I recently did a speech at a high school here, and the kids were roughly around high school age. And I come from working in warehouses. I actually do retention speeches for warehouses as well now. And I had a talk with a parent there. He's like, oh, yeah, you're coming into my son's school. And I said, oh, that's good to hear. Now, this parent is sedated, uses a lot of drugs heavily. And I said, what do you think I'm speaking to your kid about? He said, oh, my daughter said you're speaking about resiliency. And I said, yeah. And I said, do you feel like she's resilient at all? He's like, nah, she breaks very fast. And I said, well, so do you. He said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, if you look at the sources of drugs that you're using to escape the stresses of life, that's going to pour onto your kid. And it happens to be that most of the individuals around my age, I'm 34 years young, but I do find it that my age group has kids in high school, elementary, junior high. And a lot of the parents who believe that it's just the system are escaping the reality that it's also them as well. Yes, there is a system, there is a process or whatever they may call it, but you have your foot in the door as well. So it's either you're going to take that foot in or take that foot out, because there's an adult system as well. And you can't blame it on the juvenile system. So how can you adapt to that? And one thing I learned with having a degree in marketing, I was able to understand the power of marketing on the mind. And I learned very fast in school that, hey, okay, these things are being marketed to us without any filter. It becomes a choice to say, okay, I don't want this in my mind. The same way for parents, it becomes a choice to have that foot in the door and say, okay, I want to gear them down a different direction. I'm not going to use this system as an excuse. So when I speak to parents a lot, I tell them, don't use the system as an excuse. Use your actions as an excuse. You know, one thing is with parents, they have this thought a lot of times that they feel that they're not CD planners, that the things that they say in the kid's mind, oh, it just goes away. That is not true at all. Like what you say and your actions behind it mean everything, just like social workers. What you say and your actions behind it, just like correctional officers, what you say and your actions behind it. My mentor right now, I look at him as a father figure. And it's just because he's deciding like, hey, Antoine, stick to this, stick to this, stick to this, do the right thing. I've learned that anyone can be a mentor. It doesn't matter the age.
Thank you for that response. So I have a follow-up question on that. Just thinking about the youth, the system, parents. You're saying every environment has a requirement, right?
Yes.
And I think that's so true. Like it's a great saying. It's a great because it resonates with me in a lot of different ways. But we're like, because I feel like youth and young adults and their parents, their families are dealing with a lot of different things, and everybody's just trying to survive. So how do you navigate the blame? You know what I mean? Because you have families, you have parents who are looking and they feel like they're doing everything that they could possibly do to keep their youth on the straight and narrow, but they get blamed. Or you have the system who, you know what I mean, the resources aren't readily available, but that could be because of workforce shortage, a lot of different things. So the system gets to blame, and the youth is getting to blame because they're actually doing the actions and all of these things. How do you navigate the blame and still have positive outcomes?
So one thing that I've realized that's worked for me is understanding the victim mentality, right? Understanding the power of blaming and being accountable and reach. So accountability is me stepping forward and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to blame anybody else but me. And I'm not going to seek their approval, but I will seek mine first. And one thing that I've understood is everyone has that point of saying, like, if it ain't working, it's their fault. And at times to a percentage, but you have to be able to say, I put 100% of my accountability into this. So this aspect of this is my fault, but that is not mine. And I'm okay with that. Some people are not okay. And we always try to, like I always say, we always try to see the fruits as soon as we plant the tree. And the fruits are the last thing on the tree. The fruits come last. They may not come in our existence, but they will pop up. So I always look at blame as a tool to want to kind of get that fruit before the tree comes.
Thank you for that answer. So an anonymous attendee says, this is definitely a systemic issue. But how do you feel we address the system that is not serving children and families the way they need to be when the tendency is to blame the kid and or the family, not the system or the environment that they are in? We try to connect kids and families with mental health services, but there's a lack of them in the community, and some parents and youth do not want to participate. Any suggestions on how you would address that?
One thing we're doing here in well, outside of where I live in Reading, Pennsylvania, there's a lot of at-risk youth. There's a lot of violence going on in the neighborhood. And I've been working with a little bit more politicians now to say, hey, let's put these windows or access points of understanding emotional intelligence, understanding the impact of your mental health at a young age. Let's not do it when they're 21 years old and they're in the hands of others. Not saying those hands are not well, but how about let's attack this at a younger age? I believe when the talk to those who are in certain positions is held in a standard of let's impact the youth and let's start younger, because we're gonna have to start younger. Some of these avenues of support, they're only started after a person turns 18 or 20 years old. I believe, hey, we need to start this thing as soon as possible. I've dealt with school districts where I speak, and they're in pretty high standard school districts, and those kids are going through mental health issues at a young age, but it's not taken care of in the right way. It's like, okay, we'll wait. I believe when you talk to those in power, it's important to reference, hey, let's start sooner than later. If that helps the question.
No, I think you addressed it. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Ray says, what was said to you that caused you to make a better choice? What advice can you give to everyone to help reach the youth who is in a family that may not be supportive?
So one thing that helped me was a mentor told me to guard my mind, because my mind is a filter. And I was like, what does he mean by that? And he said, you'll learn more in marketing, you'll learn more about your mind, but understand why things are promoted to you. And why does it make you feel happy when you do certain things? And I understood at that point, hey, guarding my mind, the world is going to throw so many things at me, but do I have to let it go through? If you can protect your mind and look at it as a battlefield and say, hey, you know what, this thing is promoted, that's actually not good for me. If I listen to this type of music every single day, how do I feel at the end of the day? And I think that quote, that word that he said to me, guard my mind because the mind is a battleground, really helped me understand that every day something different will come towards my direction. How do I protect myself? How do I guard it? How do I bounce back from it?
Thank you for that. Lisa checks in and says, I had a situation with a juvenile where he was arrested for behavior when it would have been completely unnecessary had his mental health been taken into account. Do you have anything to offer there? What are your thoughts on mental health and delinquent behaviors and how sometimes those things get crossed in the system?
I believe when that gets crossed, it's definitely it could be catastrophic. So one thing with working with students, there's something called the IEP that's used, and I've seen students going to IEPs for no reason, and I'm like, whoa, this kid just had a bad day. If you look inside the home, this kid was going through this, and this is how he reacted. So to question his reaction, especially at this age, and then create a guideline for it, kind of, if you're not focused on it the right way, you're not really shifting your perspective about it, it can hurt the kid's future. So I believe those aspects of help need to be taken care of in a different perspective, like need to be very densely evaluated before putting a kid on a certain medication, suggesting that he has a mental health issue when he doesn't. Or you have kids who have mental health issues, but they're not told that that's a mental health issue. They're told it's okay.
Thank you for that. Rhonda says, as a victim advocate, I understand the importance of accountability for actions. Restitution is a very heavy burden for not only the youth, but for the parents. I do not like citations and the fines that applied. Do you have any thoughts on this? Juvenile is already in debt because of court costs and other things, and then you add fines and restitution on top of that. How do we help those situations?
I believe when it comes to the fines, that's always sat different with me. I believe there should be other forms of accumulating value, right? Accumulating value within a kid that's doing negative. I believe community-based actions, such as, hey, attend this mentorship, become a mentor, would be more valuable than a kid saying, okay, I need to make $500 to pay off this thing that I did negative. And I believe when you get to the source of, okay, that's $500 worth of cash, let me produce $500 worth of value to this person or to this community. I think it sets the mind in a different form where it's not always just money, 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 because then those kids will believe eventually, hey, money can pay off everything and my actions pay off things in money, which for me, it doesn't really work.
That's an awesome answer. That is truly an awesome answer. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Maria would like to know, who do you credit the most other yourself for your resilience? Do you believe everyone has resilience?
I believe everyone has resilience in them. And I credit the mentors around me, the correctional officers, the teachers, the educator, Miss Smith, my mother, the people who really told me that you're able to bounce back. This is how you bounce back. I credit those individuals because they help me understand that we all go through certain situations, but how do you turn that pain into position, a positive position? So I give credit to all the mentors who planted a positive seed in my mind, even in circumstances where, look, I was incarcerated in that jail cell. That correctional officer really didn't have to tell me, if you can see better, if you can be better, you need to see better. He had a choice to say that. He made the choice into saying, hey, you know what? I think you can do a lot better. He could have made the choice and said, oh, you'll be back in here. I've heard it so many times. I've heard correctional officers say that to people, you'll be back in here. But there was that one that said, hey, if you do this, your life can change.
Thank you for that. Kelly asked a very deep question. And I like this question, and there's so many things that could, conversations that could come of it. But I would like your thoughts on it, Antoine. What are your thoughts on these placements claiming to treat youth by lumping them together with others with similar challenges and then discharging them back into the same environment that led them there initially?
So I believe in those establishments, there could be a source of change in there, but how? How is it, like, where is the source of change? Is the source of change saying, hey, do this, focus on this, and when you get out, do this? Or is the source of change saying, hey, you're in this system, you're in this establishment, when you go home, this is what you look for. This will be the results if you look for this. I don't believe there's a point of learning skill sets, learning trades in there. They want you to learn the trades outside. And outside, that person is spending more time in that environment than he will be spending time with that trade. So I believe establishing that trade and the results from the inside, hey, this kid decided to learn this trade of welding in this organization. Now he is the top welder in this organization while he's still inside. Then he'll understand, hey, I did this inside, I can do it outside. So I believe those organizations at times, they also need to understand you do it now, and then you may be able to see the results outside, not promote it inside and then hope for it outside. If you told me as a juvenile in the juvenile justice system. Hey, when you go home, you just do this and apply to here and you'll be okay. I'm going to be like, wait, I'm in this environment. What am I going to apply to? They're going to say no to me. How about you show me, okay, build this trade, because with your background that you currently have, you'll be able to find work with this trade. So start the trade now. So when you come out, you're able to say, hey, I've learned this trade. I've developed myself. I'm at this level. Where can I use it? How can I be valuable to the community? It's like they expect you to be valuable once you leave. I want to see value from the inside.
That's an awesome point. It's an awesome point. And I think, you know, just from my experience in working in residential treatment, the thought that you know, I can give you mental tools, I can give you all of these things, but I can't take you out of your environment. Your environment is the thing that you'll have to work with. But if I give you something more than just a talk about people, places, and things, and you know what I mean? Because like you said, every environment has a requirement. And in this environment, I'm required to do these things, I feel, to survive. But if I give you something to take with you, like a trade, a skill that you can use right away when you get out, and that makes things 100% different. And then you have a choice, like you said, and everything is based on the choices that you make. So that's a great point that you make there, Antoine. What advice would you give us professionals to talk to and get through to juveniles who are currently on a dangerous path in life?
So one thing that I believe is being relatable and letting them know, hey, we all go through situations. We all have past, we all dealt with obstacles before. It may not be the same, it may be the same. When talking to a lot of at-risk youth in the correctional facilities, I've understood the saying of, I connect more with the person who told me they went through what I went through. So being relatable sticks with people. The individual that I was speaking to about last week, the 23-year-old there who's in the workforce, was in the juvenile system. I asked him, I said, hey, what was the thing about the juvenile system that stuck with you? I said, man, there was this correctional officer named Melissa who told me that she almost went through what I went through. She's from the same neighborhood. And she said, if you can do better, you can get out of this neighborhood. So she made a relatable conversation to this person that stuck with them. I believe sometimes when we have the title, we forget that, hey, we're also leaving this environment as well and going back into our environments. I believe sometimes you need to bring some things back and say, hey, I had a stressful day as well. Or, hey, I dealt with this at a young age as well. It becomes more of you can actually build more of a connection where that kid can actually remember and say, hey, this person, because that's one thing they're looking for. They're looking for people who went through what they went through. We're looking for individuals that, hey, okay, he said he went through this and how did he get out? Because that'll be the question you'll get asked. Well, you said you went through this, Mr. Ford. How did you get out of it? And that's like the lead-on question where you have to have an answer. And it can't be like, oh man, I ain't gonna tell you about that. They're asking questions for a reason.
That's very true. Very true. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. We have some people who would really like you to come visit their schools and talk to their boys.
Oh, absolutely. I'm free for email. If you email me at info@antoinehowlett.com, we can definitely set up an engagement where I can help your students reach a different level, help even those in the system reach a different mindset. It's always an honor to, like I said, it's always an honor to be able to say, hey, I was from there and I'm at this point. These are the steps that I took. You can do it too. Make the choice.
All right. So just being mindful of time, we have about 7 minutes left, and I want to toss it back over to Nancy to close, but I want to ask you one more question. Kayla asks, do you have any musicians, influencers, or social media accounts to encourage kids to follow? There's such a heavy influence in the palm of their hands because all of them have cell phones. And I'm hoping to use some good accounts to support a behavior change down the line.
So one thing is, when it comes to social media, I got the degree in marketing. I know that what I post is being looked at. I have an Instagram account as well, Facebook, all these TikToks account, and it's always at Antoine Howlett. But I use my account as a reference of, hey, watch what's going through your mind. You want to see the positivity. A great mentor of mine by the name of Dr. Eric Thomas and Jeremy Anderson, we all promote positive things on the mind because, like she said, social media has this, there's no filters on it. One moment you can see a person arguing, one moment you can see a person in a Lamborghini, one moment you can see a person being stressed as ever. So I always tell students, make sure you know what you're following. How do you guard your mind? Following those accounts that's doing the right thing. Even with kids in elementary, they're like, Antoine, do you Snapchat? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. But it's just saying, okay, if I choose to follow 100 accounts that are promoting negativity, that's all I'm going to see in that feed. And after, we do something called the marketing test. So for a week, I tell the kids, okay, spend 5 minutes on social media, and then tell me, after you spend 5 minutes, write down your emotions, the first instant emotion, and then they send it to me, and I get the screenshots of stress. I get the screenshots of hunger. And I'm like, okay, you're watching the food stuff, you're watching the good stuff. But the one who's watching stress is watching things that's actually promoting a lifestyle to him without any way to get it, any resources to get it. So then I question, I say, okay, well, what were you looking at? Well, I saw this video of this artist in this car in this house, and he's showing this, and I realize I don't have it. Okay, so why are you comparing yourself? You're at a different point. Don't compare yourself.
Thank you for that answer, Antoine, and thank you for a most wonderful presentation. Like I said, you have a lot of people who are interested in your services, so I hope that we were able to get you some business thrown your way.
Appreciate it.
And with that said, we will turn it back over to Nancy to close us out. And thank you again.
Thank you all as well.
Okay. I'm kind of floating. I'm so excited that we had Antoine Howlett with us today. He talked to us, and some of it I think we already know, but while the juvenile justice is not working, he's reminded us. I think he's also reminded us of something else that's really important, and that's, don't just sit there and take it, get up and get involved. And you can do that in local politics. I love that comment. I saw all the positive comments, that were coming through in the chat, and how much you were appreciated. I just, if we had planned all this down to the second, we couldn't have done a better job. And I appreciate all that you shared with us today, Antoine. And I too hope to see you continue doing well and growing and spreading your words. And as to our upcoming speakers, I can't believe it, but we're already coming up to our last webinar of the grant year. And that will be on Tuesday, August 8th from noon to 1:30, and is entitled Back to School, What We Need to Know. Beth Ann McConnell, a mother, a social worker, and a lover of resources, will talk to us about how to prepare ourselves and our children for the coming school year with consideration for their future. You will take away all the resources that you need and the knowledge of where you can find them. And we look forward to having you join us there. And Antoine, Wise words, last minute.
My wise words to all of you. Understand that you are the positive seed planters in this world, and it's truly a blessing to speak to you all. Do not give up. Do not give up on what you're doing. Understand that you are powerful in your being. You are powerful in your choices. You are powerful in your words. And your words will actually gravitate to a person just like me. Your words can become the tree that ends up coming with the fruit eventually in life. Thank you. It is always a blessing to speak to you because true leaders plant trees that they will never be able to sit under.
Thank you, Antoine. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, everyone. We are going to end now. Nancy and I always hang around a little bit just to make sure that no one needs anything. But thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. And have a great week.